Tony? I see you injured everything.
This gets into what I mentioned before. We're playing the same game that we played in the previous decades. It's completely different. The redistricting game board is now a national redistricting game board. You see, before we were looking at each state and making the determination what's best in that state, let's draw the districts. That's not what's going on right now. What's going on is a numbers game for the House. And so the partisan districting is not the same as partisan districting years ago. And so during this game, the number wins. The party with the most numbers basically wins nationally, because they're not looking at this specific state and the configuration. They're looking at how many numbers we can get out of a particular state. So it's a completely different paradigm shift. And that's what actually occurred with Donald Trump, 7, 8 months ago. Changed the game now. So now it didn't matter to him whether it was in Tennessee or Illinois. It didn't matter where the GOP districts came from. What he was trying to do was just rack up numbers. And so to be fair, is what I say, it's not about partisan gerrymandering. It's about really equalizing the vote, equalizing the number. And so that's, I think, the way people have to view this. It's not the same partisan gerrymandering as before. What we're trying to do, in my opinion, is get back so everybody has the same equalization of district. We're back about 8 months ago. We're 0-0. Right now we're at 9-5. If the ballot measure passes, we'll be 9-9. Now, there's some other states coming in, but regardless, right now, if the ballot measure passes, it'll be 9-9. So, partisanship, just to be clear, partisanship gerrymander has completely changed.
Excellent. So, let's take a look at, there's a question regarding temporary and permanent. This referendum that's been mentioned here and is actually in the referendum itself. This is a temporary measure for Virginia, the Commonwealth. And there's a reason for that because of the census. Every 10 years we redraw maps. But the question is regarding temporary versus permanent. If Virginia's taking a temporary approach, is Texas, North Carolina, Florida, and other states taking a permanent approach? And if so, how is Virginia going to position itself to protect its voters long term after this referendum?
I don't want to dominate the mic.
Jump right in.
But I think you're right. I mean, Virginia 1 will go back. It's a temporary situation, and so it's up to the 2030 redistricting cycle. But during that redistricting cycle, a decision could be made to do it again. Meaning that I think that's probably wrong, but a decision could be made to do it again. If Texas, if Missouri, Ohio, North Carolina, Florida continue with their districting scheme, there is a possibility to do the same thing they're doing now, but in 2030. I don't think that would be a good thing, but it's a possibility that that could happen. California could do the same thing. Now, there would be, of course, resistance to that, but there's a possibility still to do that.
There's also another possibility is we can pass federal legislation to prohibit partisan gerrymandering. This legislation pending, and that would get rid of all of the shenanigans.
So, Congressman, would that legislation prohibit rejoin lines mid-district, mid-decade?
No, but it would eliminate partisan gerrymandering. I mean, you know it when you see it. Right now, the Supreme Court has ruled that partisan gerrymandering is okay, that there's no role for the court when the politicians want to be as partisan as they want to be, you get away with it. You can prohibit that by statute. All the experts I've talked to says you can do that. You can pass the Voting Rights Act, you can pass a you can pass a prohibition on partisanship. And that would cure the games that have been played. I'm a co-sponsor on that. You don't see any Republicans co-sponsoring the bill.
You know, I want to stick with that, and we're going to get to the digital aspect of the cybersecurity, because I got a lot of questions about AI. Y'all piqued a lot of interest out there with AI there. But when we look at this referendum, you mentioned Virginia and California, but besides California and Virginia, what other Democratic states are considering redistricting if the Republicans are looking at several other states, as you mentioned?
Maryland is the only one possible, and that would be one seat, but that's the only one. Obviously, you would have to have a Democratic governor and a Democratic House and Senate. And I'm not aware of any other than Maryland that's even considered.
Right. At this moment in time, Maryland probably is the only one. It's held up in the Senate, so it's at an impasse. Illinois was considering it. There's still a possibility, potentially. But all the other states, New York had a lawsuit trying to bring in one district, but that was stayed, and so they can't do it. Washington State attempted something in January of this year, but the timeline is just running short. It's just falling away. So now what's left on the Republican side is Florida. So you have Florida on the GOP side, and probably Maryland, maybe Illinois. Time is moving fast on the Democratic side. Yeah, and that, I put that in a different category, but that's litigation that in Louisiana called Calais. And the Supreme Court was looking at whether the state should have a second majority black district. And I was fortunate to work on the Robinson case that compelled them to have that second black district. Well, they came along with the Calais case, and they drew their own district. But they drew the district such that a racial gerrymander case was claimed. So now the court is making a decision on that district, but not just that. They're making a decision on whether race can be used to draw a district. So if they decide that race cannot be used, you can see how that can actually snowball into many majority-minority districts that are out in the country. So everybody's waiting and seeing what's about to happen, because everything, the floor could drop off.
Congressman Tony, is that a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal or state Supreme Court case?
I'm not a congressman yet.
The Supreme Court, and people expected it to come out a long time ago. And the longer they wait, the more difficult it will be to redistrict and have an election this year. So no news is good news.
It's most likely people say it's going to come out in June.
Okay. The reason I ask is I think Cleveland Fields is in that district. It was the same
Absolutely.
district that they drew him out of last time. So
That's
he was
right.
representing the same district that he lost through a court case.
It's
So
a little different, but yes.
yeah, so it's ironic how things come full circle. I want to get into the technology part. There's a lot of questions here about technology because you have a population that's what we do. Technology, but how do you trust it? Dr. Malik Gladden, again, a PhD cybersecurity professor at ODU, he asked the question of why is cybersecurity such a critical part of this election and all elections where we're just voting yes or no?
Well, cybersecurity, I mean, it's big because in cybersecurity, they say that humans are the weakest link, right? We would think that, it's some other platform, it's ChatGPT, it's Instagram or something, but no, it's us because we have the power over these platforms and we're the ones that's actually going out here speaking amongst each other, right? So we have to make sure that we don't remain the weakest link, that, eventually becomes something else. So cybersecurity is very important because we use technological devices on a daily basis. And like he was saying, as far as with artificial intelligence, we're training it. It's called machine learning. Every time we're putting in a text message or we're saying something, because of all of these platforms that we're connected to, like Facebook, Instagram, whatever, we give them permission to look and see everything that we're doing. So we're helping to train these large language models. And by way of doing that, we need to make sure that we're up to date with our cybersecurity because we're constantly being watched and monitored.
This is a question for Tony Lundy and others can chime in on this. In 2016, it was mentioned by Attorney Clark that we knew the Russians were interfering. We could locate them. We know the Chinese were interfering. We can locate them. But it's artificial intelligence now. Can we locate the artificial intelligence that could be interfering?
That's a hard one.
Short answer.
I just thought of that question.
Thank you. That's a good question. It's difficult in the fact that, when you are actually trying to track it down and determining, what the source is of this information. But again, if you validate the information, that's one of the most important things. And so again, we keep going back to validation because, as you're looking for this information, you're doing the research. Again, it's got to have some type of credible source, that it's pulling from. And so that's what basically you're trying to find. So it's hard to do.
So now you're just telling into the follow-up question. If you have to validate AI sources, right? How do you do it? How do you validate it? I mean, how do you pull up the site and if I'm looking at something, I can put this in Google or I can put it in another search engine, or instead of going to VPAP and negotiating and going through and picking out, who's giving money to who, what is that one click or maybe two at the most that I can utilize to validate this AI source?
So basically, when you're looking at your sources, especially when you're using your AI, there are configurations that you can set to where you can say, okay, I have a credible source, and I only want you to use this credible source, and then it will pull the information from that credible source. And a lot of times what we do as far as validating, we would use multiple AIs to validate each other. And so in other words, because it's able to research a lot quicker and get that information instead of just saying, okay, I'm going with what ChatGPT says, or I'm just going to go with Claude says, or why don't you take the information that you get from ChatGPT, put that in Claude, or even take that and put it in Perplexity and say, okay, so let me see what the sources are. And so you can ask for those sources to make sure those sources line up, and then go yourself once you get that information and validate those sources. And again, that's kind of a triple check, but again, it goes back to, again, just confirming the information, especially before you pass it on to somebody else and say, hey, I saw this is what Chad said. We'll confirm the information first, especially, when it comes to misinformation, because again, it's very easy to spread that information, and then you've started a chain of disinformation, and then somebody's going off of information that you sent that you never validated.
There's a lot of news sites out there. Of course, if you talk to a true journalist, they'll say it's not so much. But not as an endorsement of these entities, but as a social media influencer, as persons in the space of artificial intelligence for information. You mentioned VPAP Attorney Clark. What are some trusted news sources that you believe an average citizen can go to if they have a questionable issue or question about something? They can, if they see it, they can know they can go to this source and know they can trust it.
There are several resources. You can Google, and it's kind of, you can pick the source that you feel is most appropriate and aligned. If you Google like unbiased news sources, there are websites that will they'll give you where something falls on a left-right spectrum. They'll give you where something falls on a spectrum of bias for a particular topic. So you can kind of filter them that way and choose your preferred news source. And I certainly recommend, if you want to verify something, looking at 2 or 3 different news sources to see what each one is saying. Now, on the topic of using AI for your political research, I would say we're losing recipes, we're losing skills on how to do kind of basic research ourselves. the kids already have trouble reading and writing cursive, so, I would encourage us to not use these skills of learning how to do our own research on our own. I would encourage us to think about I do use AI myself, and I do believe it's valuable for our society. It has a lot of benefits, but given the environmental impact and the impact on our communities, especially some communities of color, I would say that maybe instead of going to AI for verifying your political news, maybe you could just go straight to look up some news sources and not use those resources, the water, the environmental issues, and remember that if you're using ChatGPT or whatever AI source that is free, I don't know where this quote came from. It might have been AI generated itself, but it sounds good, and it is, if the resource is free, then you are the product. So, I just leave that there when it comes to AI for your.
You definitely want to check .gov.edu and also Google Scholar. Dr. Gladden, we know a lot about that for sure. Google Scholar is going to have just about any and everything up there. I mean, we've got a little lazy, you know, it's true, you know, and going through Google Scholar to actually have, you know, verified authors up there, these articles, you know, it takes some time, and that's all the AI is doing. AI is just making it a lot quicker for us to get this information, but once again, we just have to verify.
And I was just gonna say on the social media side, there's a site called Substack, which is, you know, highly credible. You can follow, you know, independent journalists and professionals and those that are credible, that have their own feeds and that report news. So Substack would be a good social media site to get some credible news.
Thank you. And I would say for myself, I'm fortunate enough to do 2 radio shows on Sunday on WNSB, High 91 Solar VA. And for those that see me on television giving analysis, I source a lot from the AP, Associated Press, Virginia Mercury, and then also various think tanks. Brookings Institute, Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, others. They have great studies and .gov studies as well from all of the agencies. Now, that was some of these appointees we have now. But with that being the case, there are a lot of good information out there, but again, make sure you trust the source. Lastly, I will ask this question, and everybody can give. Right now, in order to win an election, you gotta vote. You gotta get out there and vote. NACP was built on the foundation of voting. You know, right now, early on, statistics shows, the polls show a couple weeks ago that it was leaning in the direction of no on this referendum, especially in a lot of conservative districts, because they stand a chance of losing a lot of their current representatives. New poll from VCU shows that that is leaning toward yes of likely voters. But with that being the case, how do you believe that individuals should be energized, or can they be energized to get out and vote? Why they should vote for this referendum? Why vote yes? Go ahead, Tom.
I think one of the things is to change it from a partisan gerrymandering, like I said before, to a numbers game. I think we all have probably a predisposition to not like partisan gerrymandering, right? And we see that occurring, and so our automatic reaction is, I don't like that, I'm not gonna vote for that. And we don't understand that the game's changed. The redistricting effort has changed. It changed to a state-by-state, whatever additional GOP districts, whatever additional Democratic districts are out there. It's not a partisan each district, or each state rather. So you can't look at what each state is doing. You have to look at nationally, what's going on nationally. And so when we approach people, I think we have to say, this is something that impacts us nationally. What we're doing is we're doing something to help ourselves out nationally. And so that's the image I think that we have to get inside the mind, to change people's mind about partisan gerrymandering right now, temporarily.
One of the most annoying comments I see from people when we see, what ICE is doing, when we see the war in Iran, when we see these various issues, declining of the condition of our country is, why are the Democrats not doing something? Okay, you said you didn't want to vote for Kamala, and now we don't have the presidency, we don't have a Supreme Court, because you didn't want to vote for Hillary either, we don't have the House, and we don't have the Senate. What exactly do you want people to go out and do? What do you want the lawmakers to do? They literally have no power because you did not want to give it to them. So we have to take that power back. I think it's just baffling, and it is one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is that our democracy is a given, that we don't have to do anything to maintain this democracy. Each of us needs to take action. Now, I'm not gonna say you have to take as much action as I do, right? I'm a super devout political actor, and I believe it, and I do it every day. But at the very least, you can get out there and vote, okay? And at the very least beyond that is you can take somebody with you. I don't know, so I live in DC, right? I'm from North Carolina, but I live in DC. And one of the issues that we see in DC right now is it'll be like 200 teenagers doing these takeovers. I don't know who's doing the organizing, but imagine if they took that power that they have to bring 200 kids out there to go fight or do whatever, if they brought all those friends to the polls. And I hate to be that person to say, oh, y'all should bring that energy to the polls, but y'all really need to bring that energy to the polls, or you're gonna have to bring that energy when you get, I don't know, drafted. So it's imperative right now that we not only get out and vote ourselves, but that you bring a friend.
Okay, let's give all our panelists a hand. Congressman Robert Scott, Attorney Clark, along with folks, Tony Fairfax, Sutherland, and Keena Carson. Thank you so much for coming out for this very important discussion. And we have our leader of the NACP here in Hampton. They're going to close us out. So once again, go vote often, and make sure you take a friend. Thank you so much.